Our next talk today will be by Father Peter Heers. Father Peter was born in Dallas, Texas, and grew up near San Francisco, the son of an Anglican priest. In 1992, his parents and much of his father's parish converted to the Orthodox Church. In 1996, he came to Thessalonica, Greece, in order to visit Mount Athos, returning again in 1998 to begin the theological school of the University of Thessalonica. Father Peter is presently the instructor of Old and New Testament at Holy Trinity Orthodox Seminary in Jordanville, New York. He has undergraduate masters and doctoral degrees in dogmatic theology from the Theological School of the University of Thessalonica. Father Peter is the founder and first editor of Divine Ascent, a journal of Orthodox faith. He is the host of the online podcast Postcards from Greece, found at Ancient Faith Radio, and a regular speaker to parish groups in the United States and Canada. Father Peter is also the author and translator of several books, including The Life of Elder Paisius, The Epistles of Elder Paisius, and The Truth of Our Faith. Please welcome Father Peter.
Thank you very much, Father. Say it again. It's a very great joy and honor to be here. Your Eminence, Metropolitan Clarion, Your Eminence, Metropolitan Jonah, Your Grace, Bishop Nicholas, Your Grace, Bishop Irenee, Venerable Fathers and Brothers in Christ, Christ is in our midst. Consider it an honor to stand before you today to speak to the shepherds and pastors of Christ's rational flock, and in particular to the successors of the great work begun in the Russian diaspora by such holy ones as St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco, Metropolitans Anthony, Anastasi, Philaret, Vitali, Archbishop of Verki, Metropolitan Lauris, and all of the wonderful and holy men who have preceded us, who are revered fathers not only in the Russian Church abroad, but indeed the Church Catholic. The witness given by the fathers of the Russian Church abroad with regard to the holy tradition, the monastic and ascetic ideal, and in particular the ecclesiology of the Church, continues to inspire and guide Orthodox throughout the world. Today, as the Church, the arc of the Church, sways in the wake of the passing of the self-styled Great and Holy Council of Crete, we have great need of their exactitude in life and faith, or better, we have great need to follow and imitate them in these. In the short time allotted me today, I hope to succinctly but clearly lay out before you what of notability and significance happened in Crete in June of last year, that being informed you may act according to God's will. In particular, I will briefly examine and critique the following three aspects of the council and its aftermath: organization and execution, documents, and the outcome and implications. We will focus in particular on those aspects of the gathering which represent departures from the holy tradition and the holy faith of the Church, for these necessarily merit a response from the fullness of the Church. Before I begin this analysis, it is necessary to state the following in order to remove what has become a kind of red herring in the whole discussion of Crete and its significance. Supporters, sympathizers, and those indifferent to the event respond to criticism of it in a variety of ways. One hears them say, for example, the success of the meeting was the meeting itself. This is just the beginning, and it will be improved upon with other councils. Nothing of consequence transpired, and so there's no need to make a fuss. And even from the one bishop who told me, why even bother with Crete now? It has died and been buried, and within a few years it will be forgotten. We can all be sympathetic to this power of positive thinking. However, I'm afraid all of these nice thoughts only function to skirt the issue. What of the council itself? What of the decisions and its impact? one cannot be expected to believe that we've waited more than 50 years, and by other counts 100, for a grand council, the main purpose of which was to happen. Certainly what happened in Crete will and already has impacted the church, and in some places very greatly, and will become a precedent for the future. Indeed, it is for this reason that those clerics who ignore it or downplay it do it to their own and to their flock's detriment. In the history of the church, councils, whether false or ecumenical, are either accepted or rejected by the pleroma, the fullness of the church. They are not and must not be ignored, especially when they innovate and introduce false teachings into the church. Just as a fall must be repented of and not swept under the rug, so too errors introduced and accepted in council must be rejected and corrected, ideally in council. We do not ignore illnesses when they infect our body. How much more should be our care for the body of Christ? We are co-responsible, all of us, bearing one another's burdens. Let us begin by looking briefly at the basic statistic composition of the council. Of the 14 local churches, 10 or 71% participated. Close to 30% of the Orthodox Christians in the world were represented. Of the 350 bishops of the 850 that exist in the world that were invited, 162 participated, or 46% of those who were invited. And of the 850 total Orthodox bishops in the world, 162 participated, or 19%. And of the total bishops in the world, only 1% voted, or of those present, 10 of the 162, or 6%, votes were restricted to the primates of the Orthodox Church. If we compare this with the truly great and holy councils of the Church, those later recognized as ecumenical, the difference is enormous, especially when we consider the obstacles the ancient hierarchs faced in terms of travel and communication. For example, the First Ecumenical Council had 325 fathers. The Fourth, it is said, had 630 fathers. And the Seventh, 350 fathers, all of which participated with a vote. What then did the world go to Crete to see? A great and holy council. What went they out to see? A free gathering of Orthodox bishops from around the world. Behold, most of them were not invited, and nearly all of them that were there did not have a vote. So, what went the world out to see in Crete? A council of primates with their entourages. This last phrase, a council of primates with their entourages, is how Metropolitan Hierotheos Vlachos of Navpaktu, the most very well-respected theologian in Greece, characterized the gathering, which he attended and which he now severely criticizes for introducing novelties with regard to the faith. The great irony and tragedy is that for all of the organizers' grand claims that conciliarity had led to and would be on display in Crete, it was rather a new Eastern form of papal primacy of the primates, which took center stage, as you will see in the rest of the talk. The tragic irony is that while representatives of the ecumenical patriarchate crisscrossed internet highways touting the conciliarity of the pre-synodical process and the council to be, the holy synods of several local churches were only beginning to examine the orthodoxy of the text accepted by their primates without their approval. This illustrates that the failure of the council of primates with their attendees was assured ahead of time. Much has been made of the long conciliar process which led to the Cretan gathering. Undoubtedly, much sweat and ink had been spent to bring the event to pass. During the 55 years of active organizational preparation for the convocation, there took place 6 meetings of the Inter-Orthodox Preparatory Commission, 3 gatherings of the Special Inter-Orthodox Commission, 5 pre-conciliar pan-Orthodox conferences, 3 meetings of the synoxes of the primates of the local churches, 2 special theological conferences for the drafting of the rules of operation of the episcopal assemblies in the diaspora, 2 academic conferences on the issue of a common ecclesiastical calendar, and a common celebration of the Feast of Pascha with the heterodox, and another on the contemporary bioethical issues. and one academic conference on the issue of the ordination of women in Rhodes in 1989. It is truly tragic that after such an extensive amount of time and effort, the outcome pleases virtually no one, nor brings honor or glory to the organizers or to the church. Perhaps the hierarch of the ecumenical patriarchate who characterized the council as a fiasco, or the ecclesiastical reporter who called it the headline which ended up a footnote, were unjust. It is apparent that the ancient saying has been fulfilled in Crete. It bore a mountain and gave birth to a fly. Would it that this were it alone and not something worse? For such travail in giving birth to a council, such a council is a shame upon the entire church. One has to ask, what was at fault? That in spite of so much work, unique in the conciliar annals of history, we've had such a tragic outcome. We have an expression in Greece, a good day is apparent from the outset. Well, the opposite is also true in the case of the Grand Council. Early on in the conciliar process, it was apparent that the normally sunny Crete would not shine brightly for orthodoxy. As I've examined elsewhere at length, the visionaries behind Crete sealed their council's fate to not follow the Holy Fathers by imbibing the spirit of another, even grander and thrice flawed gathering of recent memory, the Second Vatican Council. The two councils shared common roots and beginnings, a similar methodology and similar aims, and at least a superficial allergy to dogma. Both gatherings aimed at and claimed to solidify their hierarchy's commitment to ecumenism, and both allowed for their conciliar decrees and documents to be shaped by academic theologians. And most importantly, both gatherings saw the introduction of a new inclusivist ecclesiology, foreign to the church's faith in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Another point which unfortunately forges kinship between the two gatherings is the absence of any demonology. It is indicative as to the mindset and priorities of the drafters of the conciliar text that nowhere in any of the texts does one find the following terms: devil, demon, diabolical, or evil one, heresy, with one exception, the heresy of Philetism, heretic, schism, and schismatic. However, discernment of the methods of the fallen spirits or demonology is a requirement for the formation of Christology and ecclesiology. As the evangelist John writes, "For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil." The absence of any mention of the evil one or his machinations, heresy, schism. There is no more heresy or schism apparently in the 20th century. The par excellence heresy of schism and a century of schism and heresy. The absence of any mention from any conciliar text is indicative of a worldly, secularized outlook, not the patristic mindset. Finally, following Vatican II and not the Holy Fathers, the Council in Crete not only made no reference to heresy, but invited representatives of heretical confessions to attend as observers, including those recognized as such by previous ecumenical councils. Although unprecedented in the history of the councils, it had been practiced in the Vatican councils, and thus confirming once again the spirit and mindset which unfortunately animated the organizers of the council. Let us look now more closely at the conciliarity or lack thereof of the pre-synodal period and the council itself. The unity of the church is manifest and molded through conciliarity. As the 34th Apostolic Canon states, "For so there will be unanimity, and God will be glorified through the Lord and the Holy Spirit." When the conciliar way is lost, the first and often immediate victim is the unity of the church. A careful examination of the council in Crete in this regard reveals that paradoxically there occurred a conciliar abolition of conciliarity. In the history of the church, with the exception of the robber councils, no other council showed so much disdain for the very meaning of conciliarity as did the council in Crete. Firstly, the people of God, the pleroma of the church, which includes the clergy, the monastics, the laymen, was bypassed entirely in the run-up and execution of the council. This is now not only a major oversight, it is a serious ecclesiological flaw. The Orthodox patriarchs declared to the Pope in 1484 that in the Church of Christ, neither patriarchs nor councils have introduced novelties amongst us, because the protector of religion is the very body of the church, even the people themselves. However, not only was the body of the church kept in the dark, but even much of the hierarchy itself. The majority of the bishops and even synods of local churches were uninvolved in the preparation of the council, including the drafting of its texts. In this regard, we recall the painful cry of protest issued by Metropolitan Herothios of Naupactu months before the council, that the pre-conciliar texts were unknown to most hierarchs and to myself. They remain holed up in committee, and we do not know their contents. It is not overstating our case to state that the judgment of the Seventh Ecumenical Council with regard to the false iconoclast council of Herea is applicable here. There things were said as in a corner, and not upon the mountain of orthodoxy. This is because those responsible for the preparation of the text knew very well the people of God's opposition to the problematic texts, and for this reason refused to publish them until very late. As is apparent from the minutes of the fifth and final pre-conciliar conference in October of 2015, it was only upon the insistence of the Patriarchate of Georgia initially, and later at the Synoxus of Primates in January of 2016, just 5 months before the council, at the request of the Patriarchate of Moscow, that the texts were finally released to the church, the final text. With this in mind, then, one can better understand why 4 patriarchates ended up pulling out at the last minute. Metropolitan Irenei of Batskas of the Serbian Church had this to say about that last crucial meeting of the Preconciliar Commission, which took place in October of 2015. With regard to the text, relations of the Orthodox Church and the rest of the Christian world, serious review and correction was, unfortunately, proven impossible. Because for most of the meeting, in spite of the disapproval of many and the sharp criticism exacted, the text, for reasons never divulged, was not seriously reevaluated. Rather, it was sent on as is, essentially untouched, to the council, where, due to the lack of time and consensus, only cosmetic changes were made. A careful study of the minutes of the Fifth Preconciliar Orthodox Conference, Pan-Orthodox Conference in 2015, reveals that the work was carried out in an atmosphere of pressure and haste, with responsibility for this meeting resting with the president of the meeting, Metropolitan John of Pergamon, who was subsequently removed. It is apparent, and a view commonly held among the critics of the council, that one of the main causes for turning Crete into a fiasco was this anti-synodical, unorthodox methodology and preconciliar secrecy enforced by some of the organizers. We said previously that the hierarchies of local churches were kept in the dark with respect to the preparatory period and texts. This is also apparent when one considers that the rules of preparation for the council only required the signatures of 2 representatives of each church in order to confirm the preconciliar text, that is, without the approval of the Holy Synods. Thus, the unorthodox text on the heterodox were considered approved by the local churches after the October 2015 meeting, without being sent, without being discussed, without being confirmed by the Holy Synods of at least most, if not all, of the Orthodox churches. In this way, on the strength of 2 representative signatures, the text was considered accepted and binding for the Church of Greece, in the case of the Church of Greece and other churches, and then forwarded to the council. Where is the conciliar character of the church at work here? But that is not all. For the text to be amended, or even one phrase of it to be changed in Crete, it required the approval of all the local churches. If only one disagreed with the change, it remained as it was because it was considered already approved by all the local churches at the Fifth Preconciliar Conference. Once again, here we can see why the churches of Bulgaria and Georgia declined to attend, among other churches. They understood that essential changes to the text would be impossible. The same process was at work with the rules of operation for the council itself. The texts were approved by the primates, with the exception of the Church of Antioch, without discussion or approval of the local church hierarchies. Objectionable and unfortunate as the preconciliar process appears, it is rather benign in comparison to the pinnacle of disdain of conciliarity on display at the council itself. There, the right and proper function of each bishop to vote on the proposed text was scorned and denied and reserved for the primates alone. Unbelievable, unprecedented, and totally inadmissible, canonically and historically speaking. The irony is that many of the bishops in attendance enthusiastically declared that there was great freedom and ease for the bishops to speak in Crete. While this is significant, it is obviously secondary in importance to voting. What mattered is not who speaks first, but who has the last word, that is, who decides. Even if all 152 non-voting bishops disagreed with a word or a passage or even an entire document, it mattered little, for the votes of the 10 primates was all that registered. As is well known, according to Orthodox ecclesiology, bishops are equal. The primate is not above all of the bishops. Rather, he is the first among equals, not the first without equals. In this context, then, does not the practice in Crete to recognize the vote of the primate alone, and not that of the whole of the hierarchy, represent a fall from conciliarity and a slide into papalism? This papal elevation of the primates is extremely dangerous for the entire church. For besides meaning the abolition of conciliarity in each local church, it will quickly lead to the primate of primates being elevated to the status of the Pope of the East, sin paribus, without equal, to use the preferred term of Metropolitan Epilephoros of Brusa. Allow me to provide 3 examples which illustrate that in Crete there occurred a conciliar abolition of conciliarity. Before the Council of Crete, the hierarchy of the Church of Greece unanimously agreed and stated their position that in the conciliar text, heterodox communities must not be referred to as churches. The hierarchy mandated that the archbishop and his entourage convey and champion this decision. There was no conciliar authorization for any modification of the decision of the hierarchy. Nevertheless, the Archbishop of Athens and his entourage, with the exception of Metropolitan Herotheos of Naupactu, changed their stance and voted for a modified version of the text in question, which clearly contradicted the unanimous decision of the entire hierarchy of the Church of Greece. In doing this, he and those with him disdained the 34th Apostolic Canon, which reads, "Neither let him, who is the first, do anything without the consent of all. For so there will be unanimity, and God will be glorified through the Lord in the Holy Spirit." In our second example of the Church of Serbia, we have an even more flagrant example of creeping papalism. The Serbian church's entourage consisted of 24 bishops. Of these, only 7 stood in favor of the final text on the heterodox. 17 of the 24 hierarchs refused to sign it. Nevertheless, because the Patriarch of Serbia was favorable and signed the text, the council considered that the Church of Serbia accepted the text. Once again, the council disdained the 34th Apostolic Canon, which calls upon the first hierarch to do nothing without the consent of all. The irony is, of course, that while Orthodox representatives to the dialogue with Rome underlined the need for the Vatican to base relations between a primate and the local church upon the 34th Apostolic Canon, the Pan-Orthodox Council violated it repeatedly. In our third example, we have the tragic anti-synodical and papal approach of the Archbishop of Cyprus. 4 of the 17 bishops in attendance from Cyprus refused to sign the final text on the heterodox, including Metropolitan Athanasius of Lemessou. After these bishops had departed the council, the Archbishop's response was to sign the text for them, in place of them, as if he had their agreement. In an interview which later was given to a Greek-American newspaper, the Archbishop characterized these dissenting bishops of his own church as a 5th column at the council. It is apparent here that these examples indicate not only a disdain for the conciliar system and even its abolition, but also contempt for the episcopal dignity by the first hierarchs. These innovations and diversions were not only tolerated and accepted by the Great and Holy Council, upon them the council was carried out. Indeed, without such anti-conciliar activity, the council would have disintegrated entirely. In hindsight, given the anti-conciliar foundation and the failure of the council to unite the Orthodox, the following idiom is applicable: a house is only as good as the foundation upon which it is built. The Great and Holy Council's house was not built on the rock of conciliarity. It seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us. But on the sand of Papalism, our Holy Patriarch has spoken. Let us now turn from the organization of the Council to its documents. 3 of the 6 documents presented serious problems for several of the churches. These were the mission of the Orthodox Church in today's world, the sacrament of marriage and its impediments, and the relations of the Orthodox Church with the rest of the Christian world. I will speak only briefly concerning the second text and focus on the third text, which really constituted the basis of the council. In the document on marriage, 3 statements are made in succession concerning the issue of mixed marriages. That is, a marriage of an Orthodox Christian with a member of a heterodox confession or one of the non-Christian religions of the world. And the text states, 1, marriage between Orthodox and non-Orthodox Christians is forbidden according to canonical akrivia, Canon 72 of the Penthecti Ecumenical Council. 2, the salvation of man as the goal, the possibility of the exercise of ecclesiastical economia in relation to impediments to marriage must be considered by the Holy Synod of each Orthodox Church, according to the principles of the Holy Canons and in the spirit of pastoral discernment. And 3, marriage between Orthodox and non-Christians is categorically forbidden in accordance with canonical creed. Now, to be sure, this question of mixed marriages is a thorny and difficult pastoral matter, especially for the church outside of traditional Orthodox lands such as America. And without wanting in the least to belittle this pastoral challenge, a challenge rightly dealt with by the pastors on a case-by-case basis, it is imperative that the pastoral practice never be loosed from its dogmatic moorings. My interest here are the dogmatic implications of the decision. According to Professor Demetrios Chalengidis, the move to legitimize the service of mixed marriage is something clearly forbidden by Canon 72 of the Penthecti Council. It is unacceptable, therefore, for a council such as the Great and Holy Council in Crete to explicitly turn a decision of an ecumenical council into something relative. In the relevant excerpt I read of the conciliar document, note that while the katekonomia marriage of the heterodox with the Orthodox is considered possible, the same is strictly forbidden for the non-Orthodox. Why? Why the difference? On what basis are the heterodox admitted to a mystery of the Church? What are the criteria of acceptance? Let us remember Canon 72, which could not state more clearly to show that it is a canon based on the dogma of the Church and thus does not admit of economia. Quote, an Orthodox man is not permitted to marry a heretical woman, nor an Orthodox woman to be joined to a heretical man. But if anything of this kind appear to have been done by any, we require them to consider the marriage null, that the marriage be dissolved. For it is not fitting to mingle together what should not be mingled, nor is it right that the sheep be joined with the wolf, nor the lot of sinners with the portion of Christ. But if anyone shall transgress the things which we have decreed, let him be cut off. And it goes on to say, following St. Paul's teachings, but if any who up to this time are unbelievers and are not yet numbered in the flock of the Orthodox have contracted lawful marriage between themselves, and if then one choosing the right and coming to the light of truth, and the other remaining still detained by the bond of error, and not willing to behold the steady eye of the divine rays, the unbelieving woman is pleased to cohabitate with the believing man, or the unbelieving man with the believing woman. let them not be separated, according to the divine apostle who says, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife by her husband. What is significant here is that the Council in Crete introduced for the first time in the history of the Church a synodical decision which allows for the overturning of a canon of an ecumenical council, and most importantly, its underlying dogmatic basis. I don't see how one could understand it otherwise. For on what basis are they allowing the mixed marriages, if not some new consideration of the Church and her boundaries, now including the Orthodox, perhaps somehow based on the theory of baptismal union, that they are baptized? For otherwise it would be madness to speak of a marriage, a true mystery of unity in Christ in the Church, between a baptized and initiated member of the body of Christ and one not baptized and not initiated. Therefore, the implication, even when the decision is referred to as katikonomia here, is that the heterodox are baptized, initiated, have a life in Christ, and on this basis they are, as opposed to those of the other religions, can participate in the mystery of marriage. Indeed, this is what one hears when he pays close attention to the reasonings of those who champion mixed marriages, for the most part, at least in Greece. This, however, means that underlying the supposed economia of mixed marriages is the so-called baptismal theology and the inclusive church theories, which lie at the heart of syncretistic ecumenism. This is consistent with the fruits we have seen from mixed marriages, for the most part. There are exceptions always, of course. Namely, that on the basis of mixed marriages, the ecumenically minded justify other violations of the canons, such as joint prayer with heretics, or even communing them during the marriage ceremony. I am told by a first-hand witness that this is in fact practiced by a prominent professor at a North American Orthodox seminary. It is clear that there is no theological basis for mixed marriages, that it cannot be considered economia since it does not lead to ecclesia, but rather overturns the unity identity of the mysteries with the one mystery of Christ, the Church, and that it opens the door to further erosion of the canonical and sacramental order of the Church. Let us now turn to the text which many consider constituted the basis of the Council, relations of the Orthodox Church with the rest of the Christian world. It is the common view that this text, the sixth and final text accepted by the Council, is fraught with error and confusion, notwithstanding occasional praiseworthy passages. As a text with a clear dogmatic ecclesiological orientation, this text ought to have been distinguished by an absolute clarity of meaning and exactitude in formulation, such as to exclude the possibility of a variety of interpretations and intentional misrepresentations. Unfortunately, to the contrary, in key passages we encounter obscurity and ambiguity, as well as theological contradictions and antinomy, which permit polar opposite interpretations. It is characteristic that with what difficulty the Council met the task of approving this text that nearly 30 bishops refused to sign it, and many others only signed it after the termination of the Council, after the 4 versions in 4 languages had finally been completed. To see that the text is a product of an ecumenistic and not truly ecumenical mindset, one only need to consider what Metropolitan Herotheos Vlachos wrote concerning the text and the debate surrounding the text during the Council. He said, "When the minutes of the Council are published, where the true views of those who decided on and signed the text are recorded, then it will be clear that the Council was dominated by the branch theory, baptismal theology, and especially the principle of inclusiveness, that is, a retreat from the principle of exclusivity, ecclesiologically speaking, to a principle of inclusivity or inclusiveness." During the works of the Council in Crete, various distortions of the truth were said in order to bolster the text. Regarding St. Mark of Ephesus, the Council of 1484, which did away with the false council of Florence, and the synodical encyclical of the Eastern Patriarchs in 1848, with regard to the word church as applying to Christians cut off from the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Close the quote from Metropolitan Herotheus. Metropolitan relates elsewhere that proponents of the text and the recognition of the ecclesiality of the Western confessions employed aggression and much pressure, including explicatives against those who opposed them. We mentioned earlier that one of the aims of this council was to solidify the Orthodox Church's commitment to the ecumenical movement and to ecumenism. This text on relations to the heterodox achieves this goal. It contains positive references to the World Council of Churches made with apparent enthusiasm. In paragraph 21 of the text, the following is stated, quote, "The Orthodox Church wishes to support the work of the Commission on Faith and Order and follows its theological contribution with particular interest to this day. It views favorably the Commission's theological documents, which were developed with the significant participation of Orthodox theologians and represent a praiseworthy step in the ecumenical movement for the rapprochement of Christians." The positive evaluation of the text, however, accepted within the WCC alone, is sufficient for an Orthodox Christian to reject this text. Is it possible for a pan-Orthodox council to favorably view theological documents of the World Council of Churches when these very texts are filled with heretical Protestant views that have been repeatedly criticized by the local Orthodox churches? We have several texts in the last 15 years which are supportive of the branch theory, those in Korea, in Brazil, and others. In paragraph 19 of the text, this Toronto statement of the WCC is referred to positively as a foundational document for Orthodox involvement. What, however, does this statement express? Among other things, it states, according to Metropolitan Herotheus Vlachos, I'm quoting, the WCC includes churches which hold that 1. The church is essentially invisible. 2. There is a distinction between the visible and invisible body of the church. 3. The baptism of other churches is valid and true. 4. There are elements of the true church and traces of church in other member churches of the WCC, and the ecumenical movement is based on these. 5. There are church members extramuros, outside the walls. And that, 6, these aliquo modo, in some way, belong to the church. And that, finally, there is a church within a church. These are all taken from this text. Metropolitan Herotheus is referring to it. Upon this foundation, the Orthodox participate in the WCC, an organization in which the anti-Orthodox invisible and visible church theory clearly dominates, overturning the whole of Orthodox ecclesiology. The Council of Crete is the only council of bishops ever to recognize, promote, praise, and accept ecumenism and the World Council of Churches. This stands in direct opposition to the witness of the choir of saints in our century, including among many others, the great elder Ephraim of Katonakia, who by revelation was informed that ecumenism is dominated by unclean spirits. The implications are enormous. What experience and inspiration of the Holy Spirit could they be expressing in Crete when they stand in opposition to the saints of the church? Now, there was a long process and a long road to the recognition of ecclesiality of the heterodox in Crete. I'm going to skip over that. You'll see that in the text when it's printed and uploaded in just a few paragraphs. But we're going to go right to the 2015 meeting in October and what was proposed to the Cretan Council in terms of the key phrase in the relations of the Orthodox Church to the heterodox and the rest of the Christian world. And this phrase, which had gone through many changes, in 2015, read as, the Orthodox Church recognizes the historic existence of other Christian churches and confessions not found in communion with her. When in January of 2016, the final text was finally made public, this phrase, among others in the text, provoked a host of reactions and protests from the fullness of the church and the local church synods, including the Russian church abroad. After the last-minute proposal in Crete by the Archbishop of Athens was generally accepted, the one we referred to previously, by the primates and their entourages, although nearly 30 bishops refused to sign the text, nevertheless. The final text included the formulation, the change now, to the Orthodox Church accepts the historical name of other heterodox Christian churches and confessions that are not in communion with her. One can see that progressively over the last 45 years, the phrase has been modified in response to objections advanced by the local churches. Nevertheless, the final version remains unorthodox and unacceptable, or as Metropolitan Herotheos writes, anti-orthodox. There are several important points to make in this regard. Firstly, as Metropolitan Herotheos remarks, it may be that in accepting the term church for the heterodox confessions, an important distinction was lost on the participating hierarchs in Crete. St. Gregory Palamas clearly defined this issue in the synodical tomos of the Ninth Ecumenical Council in 1351. He writes, "It is one thing to use counter-arguments in favor of piety, and another thing to confess the faith. That is, one should use every argument in countering something, while confession should be brief and doctrinally precise. Hence, in this context, in council, for the sake of doctrinal precision, the use of the term church for the heterodox is clearly inadmissible." And leading up to the council, in a sense, one often hears this objection that we use the term church in everyday life, we use it even in discussions in the ecumenical movement. What's the problem? This answers, I hope, this shallow and irresponsible objection, because we're not dealing with counter arguments, we're not dealing with everyday life, we're not speaking about the church on the corner. We're talking about a dogmatic ecclesiological text which has to use the term with dogmatic precision and not loosely. We can only hope, together with Metropolitan Herotheos, that the hierarchs in Crete were misled by those who argue without extensive references that during the second millennium the Orthodox characterized heretical groups as churches. That was the claim. The truth is that it wasn't until the 20th century that Western Christianity was characterized as a church, formally speaking, when Orthodox terminology and theology was differentiated from the terminology and theology of the past, especially with and after the famous 1920 encyclical of the Ecumenical Patriarchate under the Churches of Christ everywhere. One has only to recall that St. Gregory Palamas likened the Latin heresy akin to Arianism, and in the text on the procession of the Holy Spirit, which hopefully with God's help by June we will publish in English on Come Mountain Press. It's coming out with the translation in English. It's a very important text. He says there that the Latins are, quote, obedient organs of the evil one. St. Gregory did not think of the Latin heresy as the body of Christ. Although it has been claimed that the offensive phrase that we quoted earlier, referring to the churches, particularly in its last form, is consistent with Orthodox ecclesiology and the Apostle Paul, the truth is that it is rather consistent with the new inclusivist ecclesiology. As the Metropolitan states, while prima facie it seems harmless, it is anti-Orthodox. Why anti-Orthodox? Firstly, it's impossible to speak of simply accepting the historical name of other heterodox Christian churches, for there is no name without existence. Otherwise, this is an ecclesiological nominalism that we are expressing, unacceptable from an Orthodox perspective. Secondly, far from hearkening back to the Apostle Paul, the mouth of Christ, the phrase, the Orthodox Church accepts the historical name of other heterodox Christian churches, when understood in full context, and I will quote that further on, full context, reminds one of the invisible church theory of Calvin and Zwingli, what Vladimir Lossky called a Nestorian ecclesiology. This ecclesiology supposes that the church is split into invisible and visible parts, just as Nestorius imagined the divine and human natures in Christ to be separated. Other heretical theories have sprung up from this idea, such as the branch theory, baptismal theology, and ecclesiological inclusiveness. This invisible church theory has actually already been rejected in council by the Orthodox Church. This has been rejected in the 17th century. It's not something that we need to consider anew. The idea that a church can be characterized as heterodox or heretical, that's the same meaning really, precisely speaking, was condemned by the councils of the 17th century on the occasion of the so-called Confession of Lucaris, supposed to have been written or adopted by Kyrillos Lucaris, the Patriarch of Constantinople. The condemned phrase was, of the Patriarch, supposedly of the Patriarch, "It is true and certain that the Church may sin and adopt falsehood instead of the truth." This is a Protestant idea that was inserted into the Confession of the Patriarch, Calvinistic. On the contrary, the councils of the Church at the time condemned this faithlessness to Christ, declaring that the Church cannot err. The Church cannot err when it speaks infallibly in council. This conciliar teaching is very important and must be stressed again in our day, for it comes to heal the delusion of those humanists in our midst who have lost faith in Christ and the continuation of the incarnation. It is this faithlessness that lurks behind the unwillingness of many to embrace the scandal of the particular, the scandal of the incarnation, and to declare that the Church is one as Christ is one, and it is in a particular time and place, being the continuation of the incarnation and the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. This faithlessness amounts to an abandonment of orthodoxy as a prerequisite of ecclesiology. And it is not simply a crisis of convictions, but as Father George Florovsky wrote some 60 years ago, it signals that people have deserted Christ. To be sure, the contemporary forms of the heresy of the invisible church theories take a bit more nuanced form than those in the 16th century, but not by much. Let us look again at the offensive phrase in context, and we'll see the similarities more clearly. The text reads from paragraph 6 of the conciliar document. In accordance with the ontological nature of the Church, her unity can never be perturbed. Full stop. Part 1. In spite of this, the Orthodox Church accepts the historical name of other heterodox Christian churches and confessions that are not in communion with her, and believes that her relations with them should be based on the most speedy and objective clarification possible of the whole ecclesiological question, most especially of their more general teachings on sacraments, grace, priesthood, and apostolic succession. So let's consider this. It begins by stating that according to the ontological nature of the Church, unity cannot be disturbed. Here, reference is made to the invisible united Church in the heavens. This is the meaning of ontological. This is the immediately followed by, but in spite of this, and reference is made to the fractured, visible aspect of the Church with the acceptance of other heterodox churches. This is not the first time that this dichotomy of the ontologically united Church in heaven outside of time with the divided Church on earth in time has appeared among Orthodox hierarchy. Here is how the Patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew, expressed it in the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem in 2014. He stated, "The one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church," he says some other things which are a comma and not essential, "unfortunately, during her engagement on earth, on account of the dominance of human weakness and of impermanence of the will of the human intellect, was divided in time." The one church was divided in time. This brought about various conditions and groups, of which each claimed for itself authenticity and truth. Each part of the church, including the Orthodox Church, apparently, claimed for itself authenticity and truth. And then he states, which appears to be contradictory, "The truth, however, is one, Christ, and the one church founded by him." Both before and after the Great Schism, he continues, of 1054 between East and West, our Holy Orthodox Church made attempts to overcome the differences, which originated from the beginning and for the most part from factors outside of the environs of the Church. Unfortunately, the human element dominated. And through the acclamation of theological, practical, and social additions, the local churches were led into division of the unity of the faith, into isolation, which developed occasionally into hostile polemics. End quote. The similarity with the invisible church theory condemned by the church and these words of the patriarch are apparent in the sharp distinction of the ontologically united heavenly church with a supposedly fragmented earthly church. This mirrors the Nestorian division of the divine and human natures of the body of Christ. This view is, however, not surprisingly in harmony with the new ecclesiology propounded at the Second Vatican Council, which posits an earthly church with greater or lesser degrees of fullness due to the so-called tangles of human history. These views of the church imply the identification of the church with heresy, of the holy things with the fallen and worldly. With pain of heart, the words of St. Tarasios, Patriarch of Constantinople, to the fathers of the Seventh Ecumenical Council are brought to mind when he rebuked the decisions of the iconoclast false council of Heers. And he said, "Oh, the derangement and distraction of these men. They do not separate between the profane and the holy. And as tavern keepers mix wine with water, they mix the true word with the perverted, truth with falsehood, just as if they were mixing poison with honey. To whom suitably does Christ our God address to the prophet? The priests set aside my law and defiled my sanctuaries. They did not distinguish between the profane and the holy." It should be clear then that the offensive text with its heretical ecclesiology must be rejected by the church, by every local church separately, and then in a future council, and replaced in council, for it will undoubtedly be the source of a falling away from orthodoxy. There is still time to correct the course and heal the wound already inflicted upon the church. One practical solution given by Metropolitan Herothios, which would help facilitate the restoration of orthodoxy, is a future council to correct the errors and to issue a new Orthodox document. There is both contemporary support for this from the patriarchs of Antioch, Serbia, Russia, Georgia, Bulgaria, and even Romania, which attended and signed the document, as well as historical precedent. The meetings of the ecumenical councils extended for months and years. The Penthecti Council completed the 5th and 6th councils, and the 9th ecumenical council was actually 4 separate councils. Let us hope that the bishops everywhere take immediate steps in this direction, for the matter is most urgent in those local churches which have accepted the text and council. Let us now turn briefly to the aftermath of the council and the current state of things in those churches that have accepted the text. Firstly, among those who attended the council, as we said, there were nearly 30 bishops who refused to sign this final document, including well-known bishops Herothios of Nafbaktu, Athanasios of Lemesu, Neophytos of Morphu in Cyprus, Amphilochios of Montenegro in Serbia, and Irene of Batskis and others. The supporters and sympathizers of the council call upon the example of the Second Ecumenical Council as precedent, as an example of a council in which some local churches were absent, namely Rome and Alexandria. What they do not say, however, is that the Second Ecumenical Council was not called as an ecumenical or pan-Orthodox council to begin with, but rather as a local council, one of many local councils in the Eastern Empire, and on account of the Orthodox decisions that were made at this council, it was later accepted as ecumenical. In Crete, we have just the opposite, actually. It was called as pan-Orthodox, and 4 patriarchates refused to attend. Moreover, and most importantly, they have also refused to recognize it as a council, and partly on the basis of the text passed. The Patriarch of Antioch, in its June 27th decision of last year, stated that it considered the meeting in Crete a preliminary meeting towards the future pan-Orthodox council, and that it refuses to assign a conciliar character to any Orthodox meeting that does not involve all of the Orthodox autocephalous churches, and thus that the Church of Antioch refused to accept that the meeting in Crete be called the Great Orthodox Council. The Patriarchate of Moscow, in its June 15th decision of last year, stated that the council which took place in Crete cannot be considered pan-Orthodox, nor can the documents which is ratified constitute an expression of pan-Orthodox consensus. The Patriarchate of Bulgaria stated in a gathering of the entire hierarchy this past fall that the Council of Crete is neither great, nor holy, nor pan-Orthodox. This is due to the non-participation of a number of local churches, as well as the accepted organizational and theological mistakes, which we've cited. Careful study of the documents adopted at Crete leads us to the conclusion that some of these contain discrepancies with the Orthodox Church teaching, with the dogmatic and canonical tradition of the Church, with the spirit and letter of the ecumenical and local councils. The document adopted in Crete, they said, are subject to further theological consideration for the purpose of amending, editing, and correcting or replacing with other new documents in the spirit and tradition of the Church. Perhaps the strongest statement of all the local churches is coming from the Bulgarian hierarchy. Right behind them, the Patriarchate of Georgia, which met in December of last year, issued a final decision on the Council of Crete, and it said that it is not a pan-Orthodox council, that it abolished the principle of consensus, that its decisions are not obligatory for the Orthodox Church of Georgia. Furthermore, the documents issued by the Council of Crete do not reflect important critiques made by the local churches, and they are in need of correction. A truly great and holy council does need to be held, and the Georgian Church is confident that it will take place in the future, that it will make decisions by consensus, not by papal decree, that's my addition, based on the teaching of the Orthodox Church. Towards this goal, the Holy Synod has formed a theological commission to examine the documents accepted in Crete and to prepare for a future council which will be truly pan-Orthodox. And the Patriarchate of Romania, which participated in the council, later stated that the text can be explained, can be nuanced in part or further developed by a future great and holy council of the Church. However, it says that their interpretation and the drafting of the new text on a variety of issues must not be made hastily or without pan-Orthodox agreement, apparently, because that's how the Great and Holy Council came to pass, without pan-Orthodox agreement. Otherwise, they must be delayed and perfected until agreement can be reached. And the autocephalous Orthodox Church of Greece, while not cataphatically ruling in favor, it's a very confused situation in Greece at present, while not cataphatically ruling in favor of the decisions of the Council, has issued an encyclical which represents it in a totally different fashion as an Orthodox Council. Many have concluded that this stance signals agreement, even though within the hierarchy in Greece there are bishops which have sharply rejected and condemned the Council. This confusion has given rise to disgust on the part of the faithful, and as you'll see in my next paragraph, there have been grave developments in Greece. So before I close, I believe it is important, and forgive me for going over my time, it's important to inform you of the latest developments with respect to the reception or rejection of the Cretan Council by the people of God. Obviously, there have been positive estimations by those official organs that participated. And it is interesting that there are those who are supportive of the council, but they are surprisingly dissatisfied that it did not go far enough in recognition of the heterodox or in terms of other hot-button issues for mainly Orthodox academics in the West. No doubt there will be a continued effort to influence the faithful in favor of the council, a hard task given that most never felt the council was at all relevant to them. In spite of the official positive reception given the council in Greece and Romania, and also in the Ukraine and Moldavia, the overwhelming response among the people of God has been negative. The implications of the Cretan Council are far-reaching for many in those local churches which have accepted the council. The response of many clergy, monastics, and theologians to the favorable reception given to the Cretan Council by their hierarchy has ranged from written and verbal rejection by well-known theologians to the grave decision to cease commemoration of erring bishops by monastics and pastors. This cessation of commemoration of the patriarch of the bishops started with the Patriarch of Constantinople on Mount Athos in the summer really of last year, with perhaps, it's unknown exactly, but perhaps 100 monastics participating at the present time. And this has spread to many dioceses in the Church of Greece as well as Romania, where the first cleric was defrocked for his cessation of his bishop just a few weeks ago, and where several monasteries and clergy have ceased commemorating their bishops. One of the most significant developments occurred just 2 weeks ago. The eminent professor of patrology and really the teacher of many of the bishops in the Church of Greece, from Thessaloniki, Proto-Presbyter Theodore Zisis, announced on the Sunday of Orthodoxy that he was ceasing commemoration of his bishop, the Metropolitan of Thessaloniki, Anthimos, due to the latter's enthusiastic reception of the Cretan Council and its texts. Due to his stature, Father Theodore's stature and high profile, he was, as I said, the teacher of many. This decision has influenced others and really shaken up the ecclesiastical status quo in Greece at the time. This path has been followed by 4 clergy on the same day, Sunday of Orthodoxy, in Crete, 3 monasteries in the Diocese of Florina, clergy and monastics in the Diocese of Thessaloniki, Kefalonia, Syros and Andros, and elsewhere in Greece and in Romania. I don't have details for the situation in Romania. In addition to this, just a few days ago, Archimandrite Chrysostom, the abbot of the Holy Monastery of the Life-Giving Spring in Paros, in Greece, famous Logovardos monastery where the holy elder Philotheos Zervakos lived and showed an ascetic life, submitted to the Holy Synod of the Church of Greece an historic formal accusation of heresy against Patriarch Bartholomew. Abbot Chrysostom has petitioned the Holy Synod to recognize, repudiate, and condemn the Patriarch's heterodidascalia, or heterodox or foreign teachings, as contrary to the right teaching of the one holy Catholic Apostolic Church of Christ. And he wrote to the Holy Synod, "In submitting this letter to you, we place before the honorable body of the hierarchy of the Church of Greece the scandal caused to myself, to our brotherhood, to many clergy, monastics, and countless laity by the successive waves of heterodox teachings which have been expressed at various times by His Holiness the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, the pinnacle of which being expressed at the Holy and Great Council held in Kolimbari, Crete." This formal petition provides 12 examples of heterodox teaching issued by the Patriarch over several decades, as well as 9 relevant canons of the Church, and ends with a list of 13 bishops, 14 abbots, higher monks, and clergy, and 9 theologians, which the abbot is suggesting be called as supportive witnesses before the Holy Synod when he will be called formally to defend his accusation. Many observers in Greece do not expect this petition to go very far, given the present political situation. Nonetheless, it is an historic move on the part of the abbot and will be a precedent for many in Greece. And with this I close, Your Eminences, Your Graces, Venerable Fathers. These and other similar developments in Ukraine, Moldavia, Romania serve to underscore the mounting pressure upon all the shepherds of the Church to respond patristically, methodologically, to the danger posed to the unity of the Church by the ill-planned and executed and finally anti-Orthodox Cretan Council. Church history clearly instructs us that this priceless unity in Christ exists and flourishes only when we are of one mind and confess the same faith in the one Church. Moreover, recent history also teaches us that accommodation of or indifference to a new innovative ecclesiology, such as that expressed in word and deed in Crete, is not an option and will only lead to further polarization and shipwrecks on both the left and the right of the royal path. It is in such rocky spiritual seas as these that the skill of the spiritual leader is tested and confirmed, showing that he not only knows the truth, but is also skilled in the way by which all can safely arrive at it. By God's providence, the Russian Orthodox Church abroad continues to occupy a unique place in the Orthodox Church universally, from which it can speak freely and even prophetically the word of truth, a word which unites the faithful, healing old schisms and averting new ones. The Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, has need of it now in these trying times. Through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, and especially the holy new martyrs and confessors, and by the wise pastoral guidance of our chief shepherds, may we all continue in the saving confession of faith in the one Church, which is the continuation of the Incarnation, to the upbuilding of the Church and salvation of the world. I thank you for your attention and graciousness in listening to me today, and I wish you all a bright and radiant Pascha.
Thank you.